the day he was taken up, after giving instructions through the Ruach HaKodesh to the emissaries whom he had chosen, to whom he also presented himself alive after his suffering by many infallible proofs, being seen by them for 40 days, speaking concerning the reign of Elohim. And meeting with them, he commanded them not to leave Jerusalem, but to wait for the promise of the Father, which you have heard from me. Because Yochanan truly immersed in water, but you shall be immersed in the Ruach HaKodesh not many days from now. So when they had come together, they asked him, saying, Adonai, would you at this time restore the reign to Israel? And he said to them, it is not for you to know times or seasons which the Father has put in his own authority, but you shall receive power when the Ruach HaKodesh has come upon you, and you shall be my witnesses in Yerushalayim, and in all Yehudah and Shamaron, and to the end of the earth. And having said this, while they were looking on, he was taken up, and a cloud hid him from their sight. And as they were gazing into the Shemayim as he went up, see, 2 men stood by them dressed in white, who also said, Men of Galilee, why do you stand looking up into the Shemayim? This same Yahushua, who was taken up from you into the Shemayim, shall come in the same way as you saw him go into the Shemayim. Then they went back to Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives, which is near Jerusalem, a Shabbat day's journey. And when they came in, they went up into the upper room, where they were staying, both Kepha and Yaakov, and Yochanan, and Andri, Philippos, Theoma, Bartholomew, and Matthew, Yahoo of Philip, and Shimon the enthusiast, and Yehudah of Yaakov. All these were continuing with one mind in prayer and supplication, with the woman and Miriam, the mother of Yahusha, and with his brothers. And in those days Kepha, standing up in the midst of the Talmudim, and there was a gathering of about 120, said, Men and brothers, the scripture had to be filled which the Ruach HaKodesh spoke before by the mouth of David concerning Yehudah, who became a guide to those who seized Yahusha, because he was numbered with us and received his share in this service. This one, therefore, purchased a field with the wages of unrighteousness, and falling forward, he burst open in the middle of all his intestines, and all his intestines gushed out. And it became known to all those dwelling in Jerusalem, so that in their own language that field was called Ha-Kal-Nema, that is, field of blood. For it has been written in the book of Tehillim, let his dwelling lie waste, and let no one live in it, and let been with us all the time that the Adon Yahushua went in and out among us, beginning from the immersion of Yochanan to that day when he was taken up from us, that one of these should become a witness with us of his resurrection. And they put forth two, Yosef, called Barsaba, who was also called Justus, and Matityahu. And praying they said, You, Yahuwah, who know the hearts of all, show which one of these two you have chosen to receive the share in this service and office of the emissary, from which Yahudah by transgression fell, to go to his own place. And they cast their lots, and the lot fell on Matityahu, and he was numbered with the 11 emissaries. And chapter 2. And when the day of the festival of Shavuot had come, they were all with one mind in one place. And suddenly there came a sound from the Shemayim, as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared to them divided tongues, as of fire, and settled on each one of them. And they were all filled with the Ruach HaKodesh, and began to speak with other tongues, as the Ruach gave them to speak. Now in Yerushalayim there were dwelling Yahudah. Now in Yerushalayim there were dwelling Yahudim, dedicated men from every nation under the Shemayim. And when this sound came to be, the crowd came together and were confused, because everyone heard them speak in his own language. And they were all amazed and marveled, saying to each other, Look, are not all these who speak Galileans? And how do we hear each one in our own language in which we were born? Parthians, and Mephite, and Elamites, and those dwelling in Aram, Naharaim, both Yahudah and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, both Phrygia and Pamphylia, Mitzrayim, and parts of Lubet, around Kurene, visitors from Rome, both Yahudim and converts, Cretans and Arabs. We hear them speaking in our own tongues the great deeds of Elohim. And they were all amazed and were puzzled, saying to each other, What does this mean? And others mocking said, They have been filled with sweet wine. But Kepha, standing up with the 11, lifted up his voice and said to them, Men of Yahudah, all those dwelling in Yerushalayim, let this be known to you, and listen closely to my words. For these men are not drunk, as you imagine, since it is only the 3rd hour of the day. But this is what was spoken by the Navi Yoel. For these men are not drunk, as you imagine, but this is what was spoken by the Navi And your sons and your daughters shall nara, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. And also on my male servants and on my female servants I shall pour out my ruach in those days, and they shall nara. And I shall on my male servants and female servants, and they shall nara. And I shall show wonders in the Shemayim above, and signs in the earth beneath, blood and fire and vapor of smoke. Then the sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the coming of the great and splendid day of Yahuwah. And it shall be that everyone who calls on the name of Yahuwah shall be saved. Men of Israel, hear these words. Hoshea of Nazareth, a man from Elohim, having been pointed out to you by mighty works and wonders and signs which Elohim did through him in your midst, as you yourselves also know. This one, given up by the marked purpose and foreknowledge of Elohim, you have impaled and put to death through the hands of lawless men. Him Yahuwah raised up, having loosed the pangs of death, because it was impossible that he could be held in its grip. For David says concerning him, I put Yahuwah before me continually, because he is at my right hand, in order that I should not be shaken. For this reason my heart rejoiced, and my tongue was glad, and now my flesh shall also rest in expectation. Because you shall not leave my being in the grave, nor shall you give your kind one to see corruption. You have made known to me the ways of Chai. You shall fill me with joy in your presence. Men and brothers, let me speak boldly to you of the ancestor David, that he died and was buried, and his tomb is with us to this day. Being a Navi then, and knowing that Elohim had sworn with an oath to him of the fruit of his loins according to the flesh, to raise up Hamashiach to sit on his throne. Foreseeing this, he spoke concerning the resurrection of Hamashiach, that his being was neither left in the grave, nor did his flesh see corruption. Yahuwah has raised up this Yahushua, of which we are all witnesses. Therefore, having been exalted to the right hand of Yahuwah, and having received from the Father the promise of the Ruach HaKodesh, he poured out this which you now see and hear. For David did not ascend into the Shemayim, but he himself said, Yahuwah said to Adonai, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. Therefore, let all the house of Israel know for certain that Yahuwah has made this Yahushua, whom you impaled, both Adon and Mashiach. And having heard this, they were pierced to the heart, and said to Kepha and the rest of the emissaries, Men, brothers, what shall we do? And Kepha said to them, Repent, and let each one of you be immersed in the name of Yahushua HaMashiach for the were together and had all in common, and sold their possessions and property, and divided them among all, as anyone might have need. And day by day, continuing with one mind in the Mikdash, and breaking bread from house to house, they ate their food with gladness and simplicity of heart, praising Elohim and having favor with all the people. And the Adon added to the assembly those who were being saved day by day. Chapter 3. And Kepha and Yochanan were going up to the Mikdash at the hour of prayer, the 9th hour. And a certain man lame from his birth was carried, whom they laid daily at the gate of the Mikdash, which is called Yah'ah, to ask alms from those entering into the Mikdash, who, seeing Kepha and Yochanan about to go into the Mikdash, asked for alms. And Kepha, with Yochanan, looking steadfastly at him, said, "Look at us." And he gave heed to them, expecting to receive whatever from them. But Kepha said, "I do not have silver and gold, but what I do possess, this I give you. In the name of Hoshea Mashiach of Nazareth, rise up and walk." And taking him by the right hand, he lifted him up, and immediately his feet and ankle bones were made firm. And leaping up, he stood and walked and went in with them into the Mikdash, walking and leaping and praising Elohim. And all the people saw him walking and praising Elohim. And they recognized him, that it was he who sat begging alms at the lovely gate of the Mikdash. And they were filled with wonder and amazement at what befell him. And as the lame man who was healed was clinging to Kepha and Yochanan, all the people ran together to them in the porch, which is called Shalomaz, greatly amazed. And seeing it, Kepha responded to the people, "Men of Israel, why do you marvel at this? Or why look so intently at us, as though by our own power or reverence we have made him walk? The Elohim of Abraham and of Isaac and of Yaakov, the Elohim of our fathers, esteemed his servant Yahusha, whom you delivered up and denied in the presence of Pilatus, when he had decided to release him. But you denied the Kodesh and righteous one, and asked that a man, a murderer, be granted you. But you killed the leader of Chai, whom Yahuwah raised from the dead, of which we are witnesses, and by the belief in his name, this one whom you see and know, his name made strong, and the belief which comes through him has given him this perfect healing before all of you. And now, brothers, I know you did it in ignorance, as your rulers did too. But this is how Yahuwah has filled what he had announced beforehand through the mouth of all the Navi'im, that his Mashiach was to suffer. Repent, therefore, and turn back for the blotting out of your sins, in order that times of refreshing might come from the presence of the Adon, and that he sends Yahushua HaMashiach pre-appointed for you, whom the Shemayim needs to receive until the times of restoration of all, of which Yahuwah spoke through the mouth of all his Kodesh Navi'im since of old. For Moshe truly said to the fathers, Yahuwah your Elohim shall raise up for you a Navi like me from your brothers. Him you shall hear according to all of what he says to you. And it shall be that every being who does not hear that Navi shall be utterly destroyed from among the people. And likewise, all the Naviim who have spoken from Shemuel and those following have also announced these days. You are sons of the Naviim and of the covenant which Yahuwah made with our fathers, saying to Abraham, and in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be Baruch. To you first, Yahuwah, having raised up his servant Yahushua, sent him to barak you, in turning away each one of you from your wicked ways. Chapter 4. And as they were speaking to the people, the Kohanim and the captain of the Mikdash and the Sadducees came upon them, being annoyed because they taught the people and announced the resurrection from the dead in Yahusha. And they arrested them and put them in jail until the next day, for it was already evening. But many of those who had heard the word believed. And the number of the men became about 5,000. And it came to be on the next day that their rulers and elders and scribes, as well as Hanan, the Kohen Hagadol, and Caiaphas, and Yochanan, and Alexandros, and as many as were descendants of the Kohen Hagadol, assembled at Jerusalem. And having placed them in the middle, they asked, by what power or in what name did you do this? Then Caiaphas, filled with the Ruach HaKodesh, said to them, rulers of the people and elders of Israel, if today we are called to account for a good deed towards a sick man by whom he has been healed, let it be known to all of you and to all the people of Israel, that in the name of Yahushua Mashiach of Nazareth, whom you impaled, whom Yahuwah raised from the dead, by him this one stands before you healthy. This is the stone which was rejected by you builders, which has become a chief cornerstone, and there is no deliverance in anyone else, for there is no other name under the Shamayim given among men by which we need to be saved. And seeing the boldness of Caiaphas and Yochanan, and perceiving that they were unlearned and ordinary men, they marveled. And they recognized that they had been with Yahushua. And seeing the man, they had been with the word, and seeing the man who had been healed standing with them, they could not contradict it. But when they had commanded them to go aside out of the council, they consulted with one another, saying, what shall we do to these men? For indeed that an outstanding miracle has been done through them is apparent to all those dwelling in Jerusalem, and we are unable to deny it. But in order that it spreads no further among the people, let us strongly threaten them to speak no more to anyone in this name. And they called them and commanded them not to speak at all, nor to teach in the name of Yahushua. But Caiaphas and Yochanan answering them said, whether it is right in the sight of Elohim to listen to you more than to Elohim, you judge. For it is impossible for us not to speak of what we saw and heard. And having threatened them further, they released them, finding no way of punishing them because of the people because they were all praising Elohim for what had been done. For the man was over 40 years old on whom this miracle of healing had been done. And having been released, they went to their own and reported all that the chief Kohanim and elders said to them. And having heard that, they lifted up their voice to Elohim with one mind and said, Yahuwah, you are Elohim, who made the Shamayim and the earth and the sea and all that is in them, who by the mouth of your servant David have said, why did the Gentiles rage and the people plot in vain? The sovereigns of the earth stood up, and the rulers were gathered together against Yahuwah and against his Mashiach. For truly in this city there were gathered together against your Kodesh servant Yahusha, whom you anointed, both Herodes and Pontius Pilatus, with the Gentiles and the people of Israel, to do whatever your hand and your purpose decided before to be done. And now, Yahuwah, look on their threats and give to your servants all boldness to speak your word by stretching out your hand for a healing and signs and wonders to take place through the name of your Kodesh servant Yahushua. And when they had prayed, the place where they came together was shaken, and they were all filled with the Ruach HaKodesh, and they spoke the word of Yahuwah with boldness. And the group of those who believed were of one heart and one being, and no one claimed that any of his possessions was his own, but they had all in common. And with great power the emissaries gave witness to the resurrection of the Adon, Yahusha, and great favor was upon them all. For there was not anyone needy among them, for all who were possessors of lands or houses sold them and brought the prices of what was sold and laid them at the feet of the emissaries, and they distributed to each as anyone had need. And Yosef, who was also called Barnabas by the emissaries, which translated means son of encouragement, a Levite, a native of Cyprus, having land sold it and brought the proceeds and laid it at the feet of the emissaries. Chapter 5. But a certain man named Hananiah with Sapphira, his wife, sold a possession, and he kept back from the price. His wife also being aware of it, and brought a certain part and laid it at the feet of the emissaries. But Kepha said to Hananiah, why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Ruach HaKodesh and keep back from the price of the land for yourself while it remained? Did it not remain your own? And after it was sold, was it not your authority? Was it not in your authority? Why have you conceived this deed in your heart? You have not lied to men, but to Elohim. Then Hananiah, hearing these words, fell down and breathed his last. And great fear came upon all those who heard of Kepha responded to her, "Say to me, whether you sold the land for so much." And she said, "Yes, for so much." So Kepha said to her, "Why have you agreed to try the Ruach of Yahuwah? Look, the feet of those who have buried your husband are at the door, and they shall carry you out." And immediately she fell down at his feet and breathed her last. And the young man came in and found her dead, and carrying her out, they buried her beside her husband. And great fear came upon all the assembly and upon all who heard this. And through the hands of the emissaries, many signs and wonders were done among the people. And they were all with one mind in Shalomah's porch. But of the rest, no one had the courage to join them. However, the people made much of them. Verse 14 says, "And more believers were added to the Adon, large numbers of both men and women, so that they brought the sick out into the streets and laid them on beds and couches, that at least the shadow of Kepha passing by might fall on some of them. A large number also gathered from the surrounding cities to Jerusalem, bringing sick ones and those who were troubled by unclean spirits, and they were all healed. But the Kohen Hagadol rose up, and all those with him, which is the sect of the Sadducees, and they were filled with jealousy, and seized the emissaries and put them in the public jail. But a messenger of Yahuwah opened the prison doors at night and brought them out and said, "Go and stand in the Mikdash and speak to the people all the words of this Chai." Now when they heard, they went into the Mikdash early in the morning and were teaching. But the Kohen Hagadol and those with him came and called the council together with all the elders of the children of Israel, and sent to the prison for them to be brought. But having come, the officers did not find them in the prison, and they went back and reported it, saying, "We found the prison shut in all safety, and the watches standing outside before the doors. But having opened them, we found no one inside." And as the Kohen Hagadol and the captain of the Mikdash and the chief Kohanim heard these words, they were puzzled and wondered what this might be. But one came and reported to them, saying, "Look, the men whom you put in prison are standing in the Mikdash and teaching the people." Then the captain went with the officers and brought them, not with force, for they fear the people, lest they should be stoned. And having brought them, they put them before the council, and the Kohen Hagadol asked them, saying, "Did we not strictly command you not to teach in this name? And look, you have filled Jerusalem with your teaching, and intend to bring the blood of this man upon us." And Kepha and the other emissaries answering said, "We have to obey Elohim rather than men. The Elohim of our fathers raised up Yahushua, whom you laid hands on and hung on a timber. Him, a prince and a savior, Elohim has exalted to his right hand, to give repentance to Israel and forgiveness of sins. And we are his witnesses to these matters. And so also is the Ruach HaKodesh, whom Elohim has given to those who obey him." And those hearing were cut through and took ordered them to put the emissaries outside for a little while, and said to them, Men of Israel, take heed to yourselves what you intend to do to these men. For before these days, Todah rose up, claiming to be somebody. A number of men, about 400, joined him. He was slain, and all who obeyed him were dispersed and came to naught. After him, Yehudah of Galilee rose up in the days of the census and drew away many people after him. He also perished, and all who obeyed him were scattered. And now I say to you, stay away from these men and leave them alone. Because if this plan or this work is of men, it shall be overthrown. But if it is of Elohim, you are unable to overthrow it, lest you even be found to fight against Elohim. And they heeded his advice, and having called for the emissaries, beating them, they commanded that they should not speak in the name of Yahushua, and let them go. Then, indeed, they went rejoicing from the presence of the council, because they were counted worthy to suffer shame for his name. And daily in the Mikdash and in every house they did not cease teaching and bringing the good news. Hoshea Reading. Chapter 6. And in those days, when the Talmudim were increasing, there arose a grumbling against the Ivrim by the Yawanites, because their widows were overlooked in the daily serving. So the 12 summoned the group of the Talmudim and said, It is not pleasing for us to leave the word of Yahuwah to serve tables. Therefore, brothers, seek out from among you 7 men who are known to be filled with the Ruach HaKodesh and wisdom, whom we shall appoint for this duty. But we shall give ourselves continually to prayer and to serving the word. And the word pleased the entire group, and they chose Stephanos, a man filled with belief and the Ruach HaKodesh, and Philippos, and Prochorus, and Nicanor, and Timon, and Parmenius, and Nicholas, a convert from Antiochus, whom they put before the emissaries. And when they had prayed, they laid hands on them, and the word of Yahuwah spread, and the number of the Talmudim increased greatly in Yerushalayim, and a great many of the Kohanim were obedient to the belief. And Stephanos, filled with belief and power, did great wonders and signs among the people. But some of those of the so-called congregation of the freedmen, Curanians, Alexandrians, and those from Kilkia and Asia rose up disputing with Stephanos. But they were unable to resist the wisdom of the Ruach by which he spoke. Then they instigated men to say, We have heard him speak blasphemous words against Moshe and Elohim. And they stirred up the people and the elders and the scribes, so they came upon him, seized him, and brought him to the council. And they presented false witnesses who said, This man does not cease to speak blasphemous words against this Mikdash and the Torah. For we have heard him saying that this Yahushua of Nazareth shall overthrow this place and change the institutes which Moshe delivered unto us. And all who sat in the council, looking steadily at him, saw his face was like the face of a messenger. Chapter 7. And the Kohen Haggadol said, Is this so? And he replied, Men, brothers, and fathers, listen. The Elohim of esteem appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Aram Naharaim, before he dwelt in Haran, and said to him, Come out of your land and from your relatives, and come here into a land that I shall show you. Then he came out of the land of the Canaanites and dwelt in Haran, and from there, after the death of his father, he removed him to this land in which you now dwell. And he gave him no inheritance in it, not a foot of it, but he promised to give it to him for a possession and to his seed after him, when as yet he had no child. And Elohim spoke in this way, that his seed would be sojourning in a foreign land, and that they would be enslaved and mistreated 400 years. And the nation to whom they shall be enslaved I shall judge, said Elohim. And after that they shall come out and serve me in this place. And he gave him the covenant of circumcision. And so he brought forth Yitzhak, and circumcised him on the 8th day. And Yitzhak, Yaakov, and Yaakov, the 12 ancestors. And the ancestors, becoming jealous, sold Yosef into Mitzrayim. But Elohim was with him, and delivered him out of all his afflictions, and gave him favor and wisdom before Pharaoh, sovereign of Mitzrayim. And he appointed him governor over Mitzrayim and all his house. Then a scarcity of food and great distress came over all the land of Mitzrayim and Canaan, and our fathers found no food. But Yaakov heard that there was grain in Mitzrayim, and he sent out our fathers the first time. And at the second time Yosef was made known to his brothers, and Yosef's race became known to Pharaoh. And Yosef sent and called his father Yaakov and all his relatives to him, 75 people. And Yaakov went down to Mitzrayim and died, he and our fathers, and they were brought over to Shechem and laid in the tomb that Abraham brought for a price of silver from the sons of Hamor of Shechem. But as the time of the promise drew near, which Elohim had sworn to Abraham, the people increased and multiplied in Mitzrayim, until another sovereign arose who did not know Yosef, having dealt treacherously with our race. This one mistreated our fathers, making them expose their children, so that they should not live. At that time Hoshea was born, and he was well pleasing to Elohim, and he was reared 3 months in the house of his father. But when he was exposed, the daughter of Pharaoh took him up and reared him as her own son. And Moshe was instructed in all the wisdom of the Mitzrites, and was mighty in words and works. And when he was 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brothers, the children of Israel. And seeing one of them being wronged, he defended and revenged him who was oppressed, smiting the Mitzrites. And he thought that his brothers would have understood that Elohim would give deliverance to them by his hand, but they did not understand. And the next day he appeared to 2 of them as they were fighting, and urged them to peace, saying, Men, you are brothers. Why do you wrong one another? But he who was wronging his neighbor pushed him away, saying, Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Yitzhak, and the Elohim of Yaakov. And Moshe trembled and did not have the courage to look. But Yahuwah said to him, take your sandals off your feet, for the place where you stand is Kodesh ground. I have certainly seen the evil treatment of my people who are in Mitzrayim, and I have heard their groaning and have come down to deliver them. And now come, let me send you to Mitzrayim. This Moshe whom they had refused, saying, who made you a ruler and a judge? This one Elohim sent to be a ruler and a deliverer. By the hand of the messenger who appeared to him in the bush. This one led them out, after he had done wonders and signs in the land of Mitzrayim, and in the Red Sea, and in the wilderness 40 years. This is the Moshe who said to the children of Israel, Yahuwah, your Elohim, shall raise up for you a Navi like me from your brothers. Him you shall hear. This is he who was in the assembly in the wilderness with the messenger who spoke to him on Mount Sinai, and with our fathers who received the living words to give to us, unto whom our fathers would not become obedient, but thrust away, and in their hearts they turned back to Mitzrayim, saying to Aaron, make us mighty ones to go before us, for this Moshe who led us out of the land of Mitzrayim, we do not know what has become of him. And they made a calf in those days, and brought an offering to the idol, and were rejoicing in the works of their own hands. So Elohim turned and gave them up to the worship, the host of the Shemaim, as it has been written in the book of the Nevi'im. Did you bring slaughtered beasts and offerings unto me during 40 years in the wilderness, O house of Israel? And you took up the tent of Molech and the star of your mighty one, Kiyum, images which you made to bow before them. Therefore I shall remove you beyond Babel. The tent of witness was with our fathers in the wilderness, as he appointed, instructing Moshe to make it according to the pattern that he has seen, which our fathers, having received it in turn, also brought with Yehoshua into the land possessed by the Gentiles, whom Elohim drove out before the face of our fathers until the days of David, who found favor before Elohim and asked to find a dwelling for Elohim of Yaakov, but Shalom built him a house. However, the Most High does not dwell in dwellings made with hands, as the Navi says, the Shemaim is my throne, and earth is my footstool. What house shall you build for me, says Yahuwah? Or what is the place of my rest? Has my hand not made all these? You stiff-necked and uncircumcised in heart and ears, you always resist the Ruach HaKodesh. As your fathers did, you also do. Which of the Naviim did your fathers not persecute? And they killed those who before announced the coming of the righteous one, of whom you now have become the betrayers and murderers, who received the Torah as it was ordained And the witnesses laid down their garments at the feet of a young man named Shaul, and they were stoning Stephanos as he was calling and said, Adonai, Yahusha, receive my spirit. And kneeling down, he cried out with a loud voice, Adonai, do not hold this sin against them. And having said this, he fell asleep. Chapter 8. And Shaul was giving approval to his death. And on that day there was a great persecution against the assembly which was at Jerusalem. And they were all scattered throughout the countries of Yehudah and Shamaron, except the emissaries, and dedicated men buried Stephanos and made great lamentation over him. But Shaul was ravaging the assembly, entering every house and dragging off men and women, putting them in prison. Then those who had been scattered went everywhere, bringing the good news, the word. And going down to the city of Shamaron, Philippos proclaimed Mashiach to them, and the crowds with one mind heeded what Philippos said, hearing and seeing the miracles which he did. For unclean spirits came out of many who were possessed, crying with a loud voice, and many who were paralyzed and lame were healed. And there came to be great joy in that city. Now there was a certain man called Shimon, who formerly was practicing magic in the city and astonishing the people of Shamaron, claiming to be someone great, to whom they were giving heed, from the least to the greatest, saying, This one is the power of Elohim, which is great. And they were giving heed to him because for a long time he had amazed them with his magic. And when they believed Philippos as he brought the good news about the reign of Elohim and the name of Yahushua HaMashiach, both men and women were immersed. And Shimon himself also believed. And when he was immersed, he continued with Philippos, and was amazed, seeing the miracles and signs which took place. And when the emissaries who were at Jerusalem heard that Shamaron had received the word of Yahuwah, they sent Kepha and Yochanan to them, who when they had come down prayed for them to receive the Ruach HaKodesh, which had not yet fallen on any of them, but they had only been immersed in the name of the Adon Yahusha. They laid hands on them, and they received the Ruach HaKodesh. And Shimon, seeing that through the laying on of hands of the emissaries the Ruach HaKodesh was given, he offered them money, saying, Give me this authority too, so that anyone I lay hands on shall receive the Ruach HaKodesh. But Kepha said to him, Let your silver perish with you, because you thought to buy the gift of Elohim through money. You have neither part nor lot in this matter, for your heart is not right before Elohim. Repent therefore of this evil of yours, and plead with Elohim to forgive you the intention of your heart. For I see that you are poisoned by bitterness and bound by unrighteousness. But Shimon answering said, Plead with the Adon for me, so that none of what you had said shall come upon me. after they had earnestly witnessed and spoken the word of Yahuwah, they returned to Jerusalem, bringing the good news in many villages of the Shemonites. But a messenger of Yahuwah spoke to Philip, saying, "Arise and go toward the south along the way which goes down from Jerusalem to Azah. This is desert." And he rose and went and saw a man of Cush, a eunuch, a great authority under Kaneke, the sovereignness of the Cushites, who was in charge of all her treasury, and had come to Jerusalem to worship, and was returning. And sitting in his chariot, he was reading the Navi, Yeshayahu. And the Ruach said to Philippus, "Go near and join him in that chariot." And running up, Philippus heard him reading the Navi, Yeshayahu, and said, "Do you know what you are reading?" And he said, "How am I able unless someone guides me?" And he called Philippus near to come up and sit with him. And the passage of the scripture which he was reading was this: "He was led as a sheep of slaughter, and like a lamb silent before its shearer, so he opened not his mouth. In his humiliation he was deprived of right ruling. And who shall declare his generation? Because his high was taken from the earth." And the eunuch answering Philippus said, "I ask you, about whom does the Navi say this? About himself or about some other?" And Philippus, opening his mouth and beginning at the scripture, brought to him the good news, Yahusha. And as they were going on the way, they came to some water. And the eunuch said, "Look, water. What hinders me from being immersed?" And Philippus said, "If you believe with all your heart, it is permitted." And he answering said, "I believe that Yahushua Mashiach is the bane of Yahuwah." And he commanded the chariot to stand still. And both Philippus and the eunuch went down into the water, and he immersed him. And when they came up out of the water, the Ruach of Yahuwah caught Philippus away. And the eunuch saw him no more, for he went his way rejoicing. Philippus, however, was found at Ashdod, and passing through, he brought the good news in all the cities until he came to Kaisira. Chapter 9. But Shaul, still breathing threats and murder against the Talmudim of the Adon, having come to the Kohen Hagadol, asked from him letters to the congregations of the Masek, so that if he found any who were of the way, whether men or women, to bring them bound to Jerusalem. And it came to be that as he journeyed, he came near Damascus, and suddenly a light flashed around him from the Shemaim, and he fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, "Shaul, Shaul, why do you persecute me?" And he said, "Who are you, Adonai?" And the Adon said, "I am Yahushua, whom you persecute. It is hard for you to kick against the prods, both trembling and being astonished." He said, "Adonai, what do you want me to do?" And the Adon to him, "Arise and go into the city, and you shall be told what you have to do." And the man the Adon to him, Arise, and go to the street called Straight, and seek the house of Yahudah for one called Shaul of Tarsus. For look, he is praying, and has seen in a vision a man named Hananiah coming in and laying his hand on him, so as to see again. And Hananiah answered, Adonai, I have heard from many about this man, how many evils he did in your Kodeshim and Yerushalayim, and there he has authority from the chief Kohanim to bind all those calling on your name. But the Adon said to him, Go, for he is a chosen vessel of mine, to bear my name before nations, sovereigns, and the children of Israel. For I shall show him how much he has to suffer for my name. And Hananiah went away and went into the house, and laying his hands on him, he said, Brother Shaul, the Adon Yahusha, who appeared to you on the way as you came, has sent me, so that you might see again and be filled with the Ruach HaKodesh. And immediately there fell from his eyes as it were scales, and he received his sight, and rising up, he was immersed. And having received food, he was strengthened. And Shaul was with the Talmudim at Damascus some days. And immediately he proclaimed Hamashiach in the congregations, that he is the Bane of Yahuwah. And all who heard were amazed and said, Is this not he who destroyed those calling on his name in Yerushalayim, and has come from here for this, to take them bound in the chief Kohanim? But Shaul kept increasing in strength, and was confounding the Yehudim who dwelt in Damascus, proving that this is a Mashiach. And after many days had elapsed, the Yehudim plotted to kill him. But their plot became known to Shaul, and they were closely watching the gates day and night to kill him. But taking him by night, the Talmudim let him down through the wall, lowering him in a basket. And having arrived at Yerushalayim, Shaul tried to join the Talmudim, but they were all afraid of him, not believing that he was a Talmud. But Barnabas took him and brought him to the emissaries, and told them how he had seen the Adon on the way, and that he had spoken to him, and how he was speaking boldly at Damascus in the name of Yahusha. And he was with them at Yerushalayim, coming in and going out, and speaking boldly in the name of the Adon Yahusha, and disputed with the Yammanites, but they undertook to kill him. And when the brothers learned of this, they brought him down to Caesarea, and sent him out to Tarsus. Then indeed the assemblies throughout all Yahudah and Galil and Shamaran had peace, and were built up, and walking in the reverence of Yahuwah, and in the encouragement of the Ruach HaKodesh. They were being increased. And it came to be, as Kepha was passing all throughout, that he also came down to the Kodeshim who were dwelling at Lot. And there he found a certain man named Ananias, who had been bedridden for 8 years, being paralytic. And Kepha said to him, Ananias, Yahushua Mashiach heals you. Rise up and make your bed. And immediately he rose up. And all those dwelling at Lot and Sharon saw him, and turned to the Adon there was a certain man in Galicia called Cornelius, a captain of what was called the Italian regiment, dedicated and revering Elohim with all his household, doing many kind deeds to the people and praying to Elohim always. He clearly saw in a vision about the 9th hour of the day a messenger of Elohim coming to him and saying to him, Cornelius. And looking intently at him and becoming afraid, he said, What is it, Master? And he said to him, Your prayers and your kind deeds have come up for a remembrance before Elohim. And now send men to Yaffo and send for Shimon, who is also called Kepha. He is staying with Shimon, a leather tanner whose house is by the sea. And when the messenger who spoke to him went away, Cornelius called 2 of his household servants, a dedicated soldier from among those who waited on him continually. And having explained to them all, he sent them to Yaffo. And on the next day, as they were on their way and approaching the city, Kepha went up on the housetop to pray about the 6th hour, and he became hungry and wanted to eat. And while they were preparing, he fell into a trance. And he saw the Shemaim open, and a certain vessel, like a great sheet, bound at the 4 corners, descending to him and let down to the earth, in which were all kinds of 4-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping creatures, and the birds of the Shemaim. And a voice came to him, Rise up, Kepha, slay and eat. But Kepha said, Not at all, Adonai, because I have never eaten whatever is common or unclean. And a voice came to him again the 2nd time, What Elohim has cleansed you do not consider common. And this took place 3 times, and the vessel was taken back to the Shemaim. And while Kepha was doubting within himself about what the vision might mean, look, the men who had been sent from Cornelius, having asked for the house of Shimon, stood at the gate, and calling out, they inquired whether Shimon, also known as Kepha, was staying there. And as Kepha was thinking about the vision, the Ruach said to him, See, 3 men seek you, but rise up, go down and go with them, not doubting at all, for I have sent them. So Kepha went down to the men who had been sent to him from Cornelius and said, Look, I am the one you seek. Why have you come? And they said, Cornelius, the captain, a righteous man and one who reveres Elohim, and well spoken of by the entire nation of the Yahudim, was instructed by a Kodesh messenger to send for you to his house, and to hear words from you. So inviting them in, he housed them, and on the next day Kepha went away with them, and some brothers from Yaffo went with him. And the following day they entered into Galicia, and Cornelius was waiting for them, having called together his relatives and close friends. And it came to be that when Kepha entered, Cornelius met him and fell down at his feet and bowed before him. But Kepha raised him up, saying, Stand up, I myself am also a man. And talking with him, he went in and found many who had come together. And he said to them, You know that a Yahudi is not allowed to and works righteousness is accepted by him. He sent the word to the children of Israel, bringing the good news, peace through Hoshea Hamashiach. He is a thought of all. You know that word came to me throughout the Yahudah, throughout all Yahudah, beginning from Galil after the immersion which Yochanan proclaimed, how Yahuwah anointed Yahusha of Nazareth with the Ruach HaKodesh and with power, who went about doing good and healing all who were oppressed by the devil, for Yahuwah was with him. And we are witnesses of all he did, both in the country of the Yahudim and in Yerushalayim, whom they even killed by hanging on a timber. Yahuwah raised up this one on the third day, and let him be seen not to all the people, but to witnesses, those having been chosen before by Elohim to us, who ate and drank with him after he arose from the dead. And he commanded us to proclaim to the people and to witness that it is he who was appointed by Yahuwah to be judge of the living and the dead. To this one all the Navi'im bear witness that throughout his name everyone believing in him receives forgiveness of sins. While Kepha was still speaking these words, the Ruach HaKodesh fell upon all those hearing the word, and those of the circumcision who believed were astonished, as many as came with Kepha, because the gift of the Ruach HaKodesh had been poured out on the Gentiles also, for they were hearing them speaking with tongues and extolling Elohim. Then Kepha answered, is anyone able to forbid water, that these should not be immersed who have received the Ruach HaKodesh, even as also we? And he commanded them to be immersed in the name of Hoshea Hamashiach. Then they asked him to remain a few days. Chapter 11. And the emissaries and the brothers who were in Yahudah heard that the Gentiles also received the word of Yahuwah. And when Kepha went up to Yerushalayim, those of the circumcision were contending with him, saying, you went into the uncircumcised men and ate with them? But Kepha began to lay it forth in order, saying, I was in the city of Yaffo praying, and in a trance I saw a vision, a certain vessel descending like a great sheep, let down from the Shemaim by four corners, and it came to me. Having looked into it, I perceived and I saw four-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping creatures, and the birds of the Shemaim. And I heard a voice saying to me, rise up, Kepha, slay and eat. But I said, not at all, Adonai, because whatever is common or unclean has never entered into my mouth. And the voice answered me again from the Shemaim, what Elohim has cleansed, you do not consider common. And this took place 3 times, and all were drawn up again into the Shemaim. And see, immediately 3 men stood before the house where I was, having been sent to me from Kaisira. And the Ruach said to me to go with them, not doubting at all. And these 6 brothers also went with me, and we went into the man's house. shall be saved, you and all your house. And as I begin to speak, the Ruach HaKodesh fell upon them as upon us at the beginning. And I remember the word of the Adon, how he said, Yochanan indeed immersed in water, but you shall be immersed in the Ruach HaKodesh. So if Elohim gave them the same gift as he gave to us when we believed on the Adon, Yahushua HaMashiach, how was I able to withstand Elohim? And having heard this, they were silent and praised Elohim, saying, then Elohim has indeed given the Gentiles repentance to hide. Then indeed they who were scattered brought because of the pressure that arose over Stephanos passed through to Phoenicia and Cyprus and Antiochia, speaking the word to no one except the Yahudim only. But some of them were men from Cyprus and Uri, who, when they had come to Antiochia, spoke to the Ammonites, bringing the good news via the Yahusha. And the hand of the Athon was with them, and a great number, having believed, turned to the Athon. And word of it came to the ears of all the assembly in Jerusalem, and they sent out Barnabas to go as far as Antiochia, who, having come and seeing the favor of Elohim, was glad and encouraged them all with purpose of heart to cling to the Adon, because he was a good man and filled with the Ruach HaKodesh and with belief and large numbers, and were added to the Adon. Then Barnabas went to Tarsus to seek Shaul, and having found him, he brought him to Antiochia. And it came to be that for an entire year they came together in the assembly, and called and taught large numbers, and the Talmudim were called Mashiachim, first in Antiochia. And in those days Naviim came from Jerusalem to Antiochia, and one of them, named Hakav, stood up and indicated by the Ruach that there was going to be a great scarcity of food over all the world, which also took place under Claudius Caesar. So the Talmudim, each according to his ability, decided to send relief to the brothers dwelling in Yehuda. This they also did, and sent it to the elders by the hands of Barnabas and Shaul. Chapter 12. And about that time, Herodes, the sovereign, put forth his hands to do evil to some from the assembly. killed Yaakov, the brother of Yochanan, with a sword. And seeing that it was pleasing to the Yahudim, he proceeded further to arrest Kepha as well. And they were the days of Matzot. So when he had seized him, he put him in prison and delivered him to 4 squads of soldiers to watch over him, intending to bring him before the people of Pesach. So Kepha was indeed kept in prison, but prayer was earnestly made to Yahuwah on his behalf by the assembly. And when Herodes was about to bring him out, that night Kepha was sleeping, bound with 2 chains between 2 soldiers, and the guards before the door were keeping the prison. And see, a messenger of Yahuwah stood by, and a light shone in the building. And smiting the side of Kepha, he raised him up, saying, "Get up quickly." And his chains fell off his hands. And the messenger said to him, "Gird yourself and bind on your sandals." And he did so. And he said to him, "Put on your garment and follow me." And coming out, he followed him, and knew not that he was done by the messenger, and knew not what was done by the messenger was true, but thought he was seeing a vision. And when they had passed the first and the second guard post, they came to the iron gate that leads to the city, which opened to them by itself. And they went out and went down one street, and the messenger instantly withdrew from him. And when Kepha had come to himself, he said, "Now I truly know that Yahuwah has sent his messenger and delivered me from the hand of Herodes and all the anticipation of the Yahudim." And having released this, he went to the house of Miriam, the mother of Yochanan, who was also called Marcos, where many had gathered to pray. And when Kepha knocked at the door of the gate, a girl named Rode came to answer. And when she recognized Kepha's voice, she did not open the gate because of her joy, but ran in and reported that Kepha stood before the gate. And they said to her, "You are mad." But she kept insisting that it was so. And they said, "It is his messenger." And Kepha continued knocking, and having opened, they saw him and were amazed. And motioning to them with his hand to be silent, he told them how the Adon brought him out of the prison. And he said, "Report this to Yaakov and to the brothers." And he left and went to another place. Now when they came, there was no small stir among the soldiers about what had become of Kepha. And when Herodes had searched for him and did not find him, he examined the guards and ordered them to be led away. And he went down from Yahudah to Kaisira and stayed there. Now Herodes had been highly displeased with the people of Tsor and Sidon, but with one mind they came to him, and having made Blastus, the sovereign's eunuch, their friend, they were asking for peace, because their country was supplied with food for the sovereign. And on an appointed day, Herodes, having put on his royal clothes, sat on his throne and gave an address to them. And the people kept shouting, "The voice of a mighty one and not of a man." And instantly a messenger of Yahuwah smote him, because he did not give the esteem to Elohim, and becoming worm-eaten he died. And the word of Yahuwah went on growing and spreading. And Barnabas and Shaul returned from Jerusalem, having completed the service, and having taken them with them Yochanan, who was also called Marcos. Chapter 13. And in the assembly that was at Antiochia, there were certain Naviim and teachers, both Barnabas and Shimon, who were called Niger, and Lucius, and Purim, and Manacham, who had been brought up with Herodes the district ruler and Shaul. And as they were doing service to the Athon and fasted, the Ruach HaKodesh said, Separate unto me Barnabas and Shaul for a work to which I have called them. Then having fasted and prayed, and having laid hands on them, they sent them away. So they, having been sent out by the Ruach HaKodesh, went down to Seleucia, and from there they sailed to Cyprus. And having come into Salamis, they proclaimed the word of Yahuwah in the congregations of the Yahudim, and they also had Yochanan as an attendant. And having passed through all the island of Paphos, they found a certain magician, a false prophet, a Yahudi, whose name was Bar Yahoshua, who was with the proconsuls Sergius Callius, a man of understanding. This man, having called for Barnabas and Shaul, earnestly sought to hear the word of Yahuwah. But Elymas the magician, for so his name is translated, withstood them, seeking to turn to the proconsuls away from the belief. Then Shaul, filled with the Ruach HaKodesh, looked intently at him and said, O son of the devil, filled with all deceit and all recklessness, you enemy of all righteousness, you shall not cease corrupting the straight ways of Yahuwah. And now, see, the hand of Yahuwah is upon you, and you shall be blind, not seeing the sun for a time. And instantly a dark mist fell on him, and went around seeking someone to lead him by the hand. And having seen what took place, the proconsul believed, being astonished at the teaching of the Athon. And having put out from Paphos, Shaul and those with him came to Perge and Pamphylia. And Yochanan, having left them, returned to Jerusalem. But passing through from Perge, they came to Antiochia in Pisidia, and went into the congregation on the Shabbat day, and sat down. And after the reading of the Torah and the Naviim, the rulers of the congregation sent to them, saying, Brothers, if you have any word of encouragement for the people, speak. And Shaul, standing up with out of it. Now, for a time of about 40 years, he sustained them in the wilderness, and having destroyed 7 nations in the land of Canaan, he gave their land to them as an inheritance. And after that, he gave judges for about 450 years until Shemuel the Nabiim. But then they asked for a sovereign, and Elohim gave them Shaul the son of Kish, a man of the tribe of Benjamin, for 40 years. And having removed him, he raised up for them David as sovereign, to whom also he gave witness and said, I have found David the son of Yishai, a man after my own heart, who shall do all my desires. From this one's seed, according to the promise, Yahuwah raised up for Israel a Savior, Yahusha. After Yochanan had first proclaimed the immersion of repentance to all the people of Israel before his coming, and as Yochanan was completing his mission, he said, Who do you suppose I am? I am not he. I am not he. But see, there comes one after me, the sandals of whose feet I am not worthy to loose. Men, brothers, sons of the race of Abraham, and those among you revering Elohim, to you the word of this deliverance has been sent. For those dwelling in Jerusalem and their rulers, because they did not know him, nor even the voices of the Nabiim which are read every Shabbat, but have filled them in having judged him. And having found not one cause for death, they asked Pilate that he should be put to death. And when they had accomplished all that was written concerning him, taking him down from the timber, they laid him in a tomb. But Yahuwah raised him from the dead, and he was seen for many days by those who came up with him from Galilee to Jerusalem, who are his witnesses to the people. And we bring you the good news, the promise made to the fathers, that Yahuwah has filled this for us, their children, having raised up Yahusha, as it has also been written in the second Tehillah. You are my bane. Today I have brought you forth, and that he raised him out of the dead, no more to return to corruption. He has said thus, I shall give you the trustworthy kindness of David. For this reason he also says, and another Tehillah, you shall not give your kind one to see corruption. For David, indeed, having served his own generation by the counsel of Elohim, fell asleep, was buried with his fathers, and saw corruption. But he whom Yahuwah raised up saw no corruption. Let it therefore be known to you, brothers, that through this forgiveness of sins is proclaimed to you, and by him everyone who believes is declared right from all of which you were not able to be declared right by the Torah of Moshe. Watch then that what was said in the Nabiim does not come upon you. See, you despisers, marvel and perish, for I work a work in your days, a work which you would in no way believe if someone were to declare it to you. And when the Yahudim went out of the congregation, the Gentiles begged to have these words spoken to them the next Shabbat. And when the congregation had broken up, many of the Yahudim of the worshiping converts followed Shaul and Barnabas, who, speaking to them, were urging them to continue in the favor of Elohim. And on the next Shabbat, almost all the city came speaking boldly. Shaul and Barnabas said, "It was necessary that the word of Elohim should be spoken to you first. But since you thrust it away and judge yourselves unworthy of everlasting high, see, we turn to the Gentiles. For so the Adon has commanded us, I have appointed you to be a light to the Gentiles, that you should be for deliverance to the ends of the earth." And when the Gentiles heard this, they were glad and praised the word of Yahuwah. And as many as had been appointed to everlasting high believed. And the word of Yahuwah was being spread throughout the entire country. But the Yahudim stirred up the worshiping and noble women and the chief men and the city, and raised up persecution against Shaul and Barnabas, and threw them out of their borders, and shaking off the dust from their feet against them, they came to Iconium. And the Talmudim filled with joy, and the Ruach HaKodesh. Chapter 14. And it came to be in Iconium that they went together into the congregation of the Yahudim and spoke in such a way that a great number of both Yahudim and Yahwanites believed. But the Yahudim who would not obey stirred up the Gentiles and evilly influenced their beings against the brothers. So they remained a long time speaking boldly in the Adon, who was bearing witness to the word of his Savior, giving signs and wonders to be done by their hands. And the crowd of the city was divided, and some sided with the Yahudim, and some with the emissaries. But when a move took place by both the Gentiles and Yahudim with their rulers to mistreat and stone them, they became aware of it and fled to Lystra and Derbe, cities of Lycaonia, and the country round about, and they were bringing the good news there. And in Lystra there was sitting a certain man disabled, and his feet a cripple from his mother's womb, who had never walked. This one heard Shaul speaking, who, looking intently at him and seeing that he had believed to be healed, said with a loud voice, "Stand upright on your feet." And he sprang up and began to walk. And when the crowd saw what Shaul had done, they lifted up their voices, saying in Lycaonian, "The mighty ones have become like men and come down to us." And they called Barnabas Zeus, and Shaul Hermes, since he was the chief speaker, and the priests of Zeus, being in front of their city, brought oxen and reefs to the gates, and wanted to offer with the crowd. And when the emissaries Barnabas and Shaul heard this, they tore their garments and ran in among the crowd, crying out and saying, "Men, why are you doing this? We also are men with the same nature as you, bringing to you the good news, to turn from these worthless matters to the living Elohim, who made the Shemaim and the earth and the sea and all that is in them, who in past generations allowed all the nations to walk in their own ways, though indeed he did not leave himself without witness, doing good, giving us rain from the Shemaim and fruit-bearing seasons, filling our hearts with food and gladness." Even with these words, they still had difficulty in stopping the crowds from offering to them. But Yahudim arrived from Antioch and Iconium, and having won over the crowds, they stoned Shaul, dragged him out of the city, thinking he was dead. But while the Talmudim gathered around him, he rose up and went into the city. And on the next day he went with Barnabas to Derbe. And having brought the good news to that city, and having instructed many, they returned to Lystra and Iconium and Antiochia, strengthening the beings of the Talmudim, encouraging them to continue in the belief, and that through many pressures we have to enter the reign of Elohim. And having appointed elders in every assembly, having prayed with fasting, they committed them to the Adon in whom they had believed. And having passed through Pisidia, they came to Pamphylia, and having spoken the word of Perge, they went down to Attalaia, and from there they sailed to Antiochia, where they had been committed to the favor of Elohim for the work which they had completed. And having arrived and having gathered together the assembly, they related all that Elohim had done with them, and that he had opened the door of belief to the Gentiles, and they remained there a long time with the Talmudim. Chapter 15. And certain men came down from Yehudah and were teaching the brothers, unless you are circumcised according to the practice of Moshe, you are unable to be saved. So when Shaul and Barnabas had a small dissension and dispute with them, they arranged for Shaul and Barnabas and certain others of them to go up to Jerusalem to the emissaries and elders about this question. So being sent on their way by the assembly, they passed through Phoenicia and Shamaron, relating the conversation of the Gentiles, and they were causing great joy to all the brothers. And having arrived in Jerusalem, they were received by the assembly and the emissaries and the elders, and they reported all that Elohim had done with them. And some of the believers who belonged to the sect of the Pharisees rose up, saying, it is necessary to circumcise them, and to command them to keep the Torah of Moshe. And the emissaries of the elders came together to look into this matter. And when there had been much dispute, Kepha rose up and said to them, men, brothers, you know that a good while ago Elohim chose among us, that by my mouth the Gentiles should hear the word of the good news and believe. And Elohim, who knows the heart, bore witness to them by giving them the Ruach HaKodesh, as also to us, and made no distinction between us and them, cleansing their hearts by belief. Now then, why do you try Elohim by putting a yoke on the neck of the Talmudim, which neither our fathers nor we were able to bear? But through the favor of the Adon, Yahushua HaMashiach, we trust to be saved in the same way as they. And all the crowd was silent and were listening to Barnabas and Shaul declaring how many miracles and wonders Elohim did among the Gentiles through them. And after they were silent, Yaakov answered, saying, men, brothers, listen to me. Shimon has declared how Elohim first visited the Gentiles to take out of them a people for his name. And the words of the Navi'im agree with this, as it has been written. After this I shall return and rebuild the booth of David, which has fallen down, and I shall rebuild its ruins, and I shall straighten it, so that the remnant of mankind shall seek Yahuwah, even all the Gentiles on whom my name has been called, says Yahuwah, who is doing all this. the defilements of idols, and from whoring, and from what is strangled, and from blood. For from the ancient generations Moshe has in every city those proclaiming him, being read in the congregations every Shabbat. Then it seemed good to the emissaries and elders with all the assembly to send chosen men from among them to Antiochia with Shaul and Barnabas, Yehuda being called Barsaba, and Silah, leading men among the brothers, having written by their hand this, the emissaries and the elders and the brothers, to the brothers who are of the Gentiles in Antiochia and Syria and Kilkia, greetings. Since we have heard that some who went out from us have troubled you with words, unsettling your lives, to whom we gave no command, it seemed good to us, having become of one mind, to send chosen men to you with our beloved Barnabas and Shaul, men who have given up their lives for the name of our Adon Yahushua Mashiach. We have therefore sent Yehuda and Silah, who are also confirming this by word of mouth, for it seemed good to the Ruach HaKodesh and to us to lay upon you no greater burden than these necessities, that you abstain from what is offered to idols and blood, and what is strangled and whoring. If you keep yourselves from these, you shall do well. Be strong. They therefore, being sent off, went to Antiochia, and having gathered the crowd together, they delivered the letter. And having read it, they rejoiced over its encouragement. And Yehuda and Silah, being themselves also Navi'im, encouraged the brothers with many words and strengthened them. And having spent some time, they were sent back in peace from the brothers to the emissaries. But it seemed good to Silah to remain. And Shaul and Barnabas continued in Antiochia, teaching and bringing with many others also the good news, the word of Yahuwah. And after some days, Shaul said to Barnabas, let us now go back and visit our brothers in every city we proclaim the word of Yahuwah, and see how they are. And Barnabas purposed to take with them Yochanan, called Marcos, but Shaul thought it not fit to take with them the one who withdrew from them in Pamphylia, and had not gone with them to the work. A sharp feeling therefore came to be, so that they parted from one another. And so Barnabas took Marcos and sailed to Kupros, and Shaul chose Silah and went off, being committed by the brothers to the favor of Elohim. And he went through Syria and Kilkia, strengthening the assemblies. Chapter 16. And he came to Derbe and Lystra, and see, a certain Talmud was there, named Timotheus, the son of a certain Yahudi woman who believed, but his father was Yahwehite, who was well spoken of by the brothers who were at Lystra and Iconium. Shaul wanted to have this one go with him, and he took him and circumcised him because of the Yahudim who were in those places, where they all knew that his father was Yahwehite. And as they went through the cities, they delivered them the regulations to keep, which were decided by the emissaries and the elders at Jerusalem. Then, indeed, the assemblies were strengthened in the belief and increased in number every day. And having passed through Phrygia and the Galatian country, they were forbidden by the Ruach HaKodesh to speak the word in Asia. When they came to Mysia, they tried to go into Bithynia, but the Ruach did not allow them. And having passed by Mysia, they came down to Troas. And in the night a vision appeared to Shaul. A man of Macedonia was standing, begging him and saying, come when he saw the vision, immediately we sought to go to Macedonia, concluding that the Athon had called us to bring the good news to them. Therefore, sailing from Troas, we ran a straight course to Samothrake, and the next day came to Neapolis, and from there to Philippos, which is the principal city of that part of Macedonia, a colony. And we were staying in that city for some days, and on the Shabbat we went outside the city by a river where there used to be break. Having sat down, we were speaking to the woman who met there, and a certain woman named Ludia, a seller of purple from the city of Thutaria, worshiping Elohim, was hearing, whose heart the Athon opened to pay attention to what Shaul said. And when she was immersed in her household, she begged us, saying, if you have judged me to be believing, and the Athon come to my house and stay. And she urged us, and it came to be as we went to prayer that a certain slave girl possessed with a spirit of Putan would met us, who brought her masters much profit by foretelling. Having followed Shaul and us, she cried out, saying, these men are the servants of the Most High Elohim, who proclaim to us the way of deliverance. And she was doing this for many days. But Shaul, greatly annoyed, turned and said to the spirit, I command you in the name of Yahushua Mashiach to come out of her. And it came out that same hour. But when her masters saw that their anticipation of money making was gone, they seized Shaul and Silah and dragged them into the marketplace to the rulers. And having brought them to the captains, they said, these men, being Yahudim, greatly disturb our city, and they proclaim practices which are not right for us to receive nor to do, being Romans. And the crowd rose up together against them, and the captains tore off their garments and commanded them to be beaten with rods. And having laid many blows upon them, they threw them into prison, commanding the jailer to keep them safely. Who, having received such a command, put them into the inner prison and fastened their feet in the stocks. And at midnight, Shaul and Silah were praying and singing songs to Elohim, and the prisoners were listening to them. And suddenly a great earthquake took place, so that the foundations of the prison were shaken, and immediately all the doors were opened, and all the chains came loose. And the jailer, awakening from sleep and seeing the prison doors open, thinking the prisoners had fled, drew his sword and was about to kill himself. But Shaul called with a loud voice, saying, do not harm yourself, for we are all here. And asking for a light, he ran in and fell down trembling before Shaul and Silah. And having led them outside, he said, masters, what do I have to do to be saved? And they said, believe on the Athon, Yahushua Mashiach, and you shall be saved, you and your household. And they spoke the word of Yahuwah to him and to all who were in his house. And taking them in that hour on the night, he washed their wounds, and immediately he was immersed, he and all that were his. And having brought them into his house, he put food before them, and he rejoiced with all his household, having believed in Elohim. And when When they came, the authorities sent the officers saying, "Let these men go." And the jailer reported these words to Shaul, saying, "The captains have sent to let you go. Now then, come out and go in peace." But Shaul said to them, "They have beaten us publicly, uncondemned, being Romans. They have thrown us into prison, and now do they throw us out secretly? No, indeed. Let them come themselves and bring us out." And the officers reported these words to the authorities, and they were afraid when they heard that they were Romans. And having come, they pleaded with them and brought them out and asked them to leave the city. So coming out of the prison, they went to Lydia, and seeing the brothers, they encouraged them and went forth. Chapter 17. And having passed through Philios and Apollonia, they came to Thessaloniki, where there was a congregation of Yahudim. And according to his practice, Shaul went in unto them, and for 3 Shabbathos was reasoning with them from the scriptures, explaining and pointing out that Hamashiach had to suffer and rise again from the dead, and that this is Hamashiach Yahusha, whom I proclaim to you. And some of them believed, and a large number of the worshiping Yahwehnites, and not a few of the leading women joined Shaul and Silah. But the Yahudim who did not believe, having become envious, took some of the wicked men from the marketplace and gathered a mob, disturbed all the city, and came upon the house of Yason, and were seeking to bring them out to the people. But not finding them, they dragged Yason and some of the brothers to the city rulers, crying out, "They who have turned the world upside down have come here too, whom Yason has received, and all of them are acting contrary to the dogmas of Kaiser, saying there is another sovereign, Yahusha." And they troubled the crowd and the city rulers when they heard this, and when they had received a pledge from Yason and the rest, they let them go. And the brothers immediately sent Shaul and Silah away by night to Beroria, who, having come, went into the congregation of the Yahudim. Now these were more noble than those in Thessaloniki, who received the word with great eagerness and searched the scriptures daily if these were so, that many of them truly believed, and also not a few of the Yahudites, decent women as well as men. And when the Yahudim from Thessaloniki came to know that the word of Yahuwah was proclaimed by Shaul at Beroia, they came there also and stirred up the crowds. And then immediately the brothers sent Shaul away to go to the sea. But both Silah and Timotheus stayed there. And those who arranged for Shaul brought him to Athena. And receiving a command from Silah and Timotheus to join him as soon as possible, they departed. But while Shaul was waiting for them at Athena, his spirit was stirred up within him when he saw that the city was utterly idolatrous. Therefore, indeed, he was reasoning in the congregation with the Yahudim and with the Gentile worshippers, and in the marketplace daily with those who met there. And some of the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers encountered him and some were saying, "What does this babbler want to say?" Others said, "He seems to be a proclaimer of strange mighty ones, because to them he brought the good news, Yahusha, and the resurrection." So they laid hold of him and brought him to the Areopagus, saying, "Are we able to know what this fresh teaching is of which you speak? For you are bringing some strangeness to our ears. We want then to know what these mean. For all the Athenians and the strangers living there spent their leisure time in doing naught but to speak or to hear what is fresh. And having stood in the midst of Areopagus, Shaul said, "Men of Athene, I see that you are very religious in all. For passing through and observing the objects of your worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To the unknown mighty one.' Not knowing then whom you worship, I make him known to you. Yahuwah, who made the world and all that is in it, this one, being a throne of the Shemaim and earth, does not dwell in dwellings made with hands, nor is he served with men's hands as if needing any, himself giving to all high and breath and all. And he has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, having ordained beforehand the times and the boundaries of their dwelling, to seek the throne, if at least they would reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and are, as also some of your own poets have said. For we are also his offspring. Now then, since we are the offspring of Elohim, we should not think that the Elohim is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by the skill and thought of man. Truly, then, having overlooked these times of ignorance, Elohim now commands all men everywhere to repent, because he has appointed a day on which he is going to judge the world in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed, having given proof of this to all by raising him from the dead. And hearing of the resurrection of the dead, some indeed mocked, while others said, "We shall hear you again concerning this." And so Shaul went out from among them, but some men joined him and believed. Among them, Dionysius, the Areopagite, and a woman named Damaris, and others with them. Chapter 18. And after this, Shaul left Athene and went to Corinthos. And he found a certain Yahudi named Aquilus, born in Pontus, who had recently come from Italia with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had commanded all the Yahudim to leave Rome, and he came to them. And because he was in the same trade, he stayed with them and was working, for they were tent makers by trade. And he was reasoning in the congregation every Shabbat and won over both Yahudim and Yammanites. And when Sila and Timotheus came down from Macedonia, Shaul was pressed by the Ruach and earnestly witnessed to the Yahudim that Yahusha is Hamashiach. However, when they resisted and blasphemed, he shook his garments and said to them, "Your blood is upon your head. I am clean. From now on I shall go to the Gentiles." And having left there, he came to the house of a certain man named Justus, and who worshipped Elohim. Whose house was next to the congregation. And Crispus, the ruler of the congregation, believed in the Adon with all his household. And many of the Corinthians, hearing, believed and were immersed. And the Adon spoke to Shaul in the night by a vision. Do not be afraid, but speak, and do not be silent. Because I am with you. I am with you. And no one shall attack you to do you evil, because I have much people in this city. And he remained a year and 6 months, teaching the word of Yahuwah among them. And when Galion, whose proconsul of Achaia, the Yahudim with one mind rose up against Shaul and brought him to the judgment seat, saying, "This one seduces men to worship Elohim contrary to the Torah." And as Shaul was about to open his mouth, Galion said to the Yahudim, "If it were a matter of wrongdoing or wicked recklessness, O Yahudim, there would be reason why I should bear with you. But if it is a question of words and names and a law which is among you, see to it yourselves, for I do not want to be a judge of these." And he drove them away from the judgment seat. And all the Yammanites took Sosthenes, the ruler of the congregation, and beat him before the judgment seat. But Galion showed no concern whatever. And Shaul, having stayed several days more, having taken leave of the brothers, was sailing for Syria, and Priscilla and Aquilus were with him, having shaved his hair at Kegrai, for he had taken a vow. And he came to Ephesus and left them there, but he himself went into the congregation and reasoned with the Yahudim. And when they asked him to stay a longer time with them, he declined. But took leave of them, saying, "I have to keep this coming festival in Jerusalem by all means, but I shall come back to you, Elohim desiring so. And he sailed from Ephesus, and having come to Caesarea, going up and greeting the assembly, he went down to Antiochia, and having spent some time there, he went forth, passing through the country of Galatia, and on through Phrygia, strengthening all the Talmudim. And a certain Yahudi named Apollos, born at Alexandria, and learned man and mighty in the Scriptures, came to Ephesus. This one had been instructed in the way of the Adon, and being fervent in spirit, he was speaking and teaching that about the Adon exactly, though he knew only the immersion of Yochanan. And he began to speak boldly in the congregation. And when Aquila and Priscilla heard him, they took him aside and explained to him the way of Elohim more exactly. And when he intended to pass through Achaia, the brothers, having encouraged him, wrote to the Talmudim to receive him, who, having arrived, greatly helped those who believed through favor. For with power he refuted the Yahudim publicly, showing from the Scriptures that Yahushua is HaMashiach. And it came to be, while Apollos was at Corinthos, that Shaul, having passed through the upper parts, came to Ephesus, and having found some Talmudim, he said to them, Did you receive the Ruach HaKodesh when you believed? And they said to him, No, we have not even heard that there is a Ruach HaKodesh. And he said to them, Into what then were you immersed? And they said, Into Yochanan's immersion. And Shaul said, Yochanan indeed immersed with an immersion of repentance, saying to the people that they should believe in the one who is coming after him, that is, in Mashiach Yahushua. And when they heard this, they were immersed in the name of the Adon Yahushua. And when Shaul had laid hands on them, the Ruach HaKodesh came upon them, and they were speaking in tongues in Nabu. And all the men were about 12, and having gone into the congregation, he spoke boldly for 3 months, reasoning and persuading concerning the reign of Elohim. But when some were hardened and did not believe, speaking evil of the way before the crowd, he withdrew from them and separated the Talmudim, reasoning daily in the school of Tyrannus. And this took place for 2 years, and that all who dwelt in Asia heard the word of the Adon Yahusha, both Yahudim and Yahwanites. And Elohim worked unusual miracles through the hands of Shaul, so that even handkerchiefs or aprons were brought from his body to the sick, and the diseases left them, and the wicked spirits went out of them. But certain roving Yahudi exorcists took it upon themselves to call the name of the Adon Yahusha over those who had wicked spirits, saying, We exorcise you in the name by Yahusha, whom Shaul proclaims. And there were 7 sons of a certain Sekuya, a Yahudi chief Kohen, who were doing this. And the wicked spirits answering said, Yahusha I know, and Shaul I know, but who are you? And the man in whom the wicked spirit was leaped on them, overpowered them, and prevailed against them, and wounded. And this became known to all, both Yahudim and Yammanites, dwelling in Ephesus. And fear fell on them all, and the name of the Adon Yahushua was made great. And many who had believed came confessing and declaring their deeds. And many of those who had practiced magic brought their books together, burning them before all. And they reckoned up the value of them, and found it to be 50,000 pieces of silver. So the word of the Adon was growing mightily and prevailing. Now when these had been completed, Shaul purposed in the Ruach, when he had passed through Macedonia and Achaia, to go to Jerusalem, saying, after I have been there, I have to see Rome too. And having sent into Macedonia 2 of those assisting him, Timotheus and Erastus, he himself remained in Asia for a time. And about that time there came to be a great commotion about the way. For a certain man named Demetrius, a silversmith, who made silver shrines of Artemis, provided no little business to the craftsmen, who having called them together with the workers of the same, said, Men, you know that our wealth is from this business. And you see and hear that not only at Ephesus, but throughout almost all Asia, this Shaul has persuaded and turned away a large number, saying that they are not mighty ones, which are made with hands. And not only is this trade of ours in danger of coming to rejection, but also that the temple of the great female mighty one Artemis, whom all Asia and the world worship, shall be regarded as worthless, and her greatness diminished. And having heard this, they were filled with rage and cried out, saying, Greater is Artemis of the Ephesians. And the entire city was filled with confusion, and they rushed with one mind into the theater, having seized Gaius of Aristarchus, Macedonians, Shaul's fellow travelers. And Shaul, intending to go in among the mob, the Talmudim did not allow him. And some of the officials of Asia, being his friends, sent to him begging him not to risk himself in the theater. Then others indeed shouted this, and others that, for the assembly was confused, and most of them did not know why they had come together. And some of the crowd instructed Alexandros, the Yahudim, putting him forward, and Alexandros motioned with his hand and wanted to make his defense to the people. But having recognized that he was Yahudi, all with one voice cried out for about 2 hours, Great is Artemis of the Ephesians. And the city clerk, having claimed the crowd, said, Men of Ephesus, what man is there who does not know that the city of the Ephesians is the guardian of the temple of the great female mighty one Artemis, and of that which fell down from Zeus? Therefore, if these are undeniable, you need to be calm, and do not act rashly, for you have brought these men here who are neither temple robbers nor speaking evil of your female mighty one. If truly then Demetrius and his fellow craftsmen have a case against anyone, the courts are open, and there are proconsuls. Let them accuse one another. And if you have any further complaints, it shall be settled in the regular assembly. For we are in danger of being accused of riots concerning today. there being no reason which we could give to account for this disorderly gathering. And having said this, he dismissed the assembly. Chapter 20. After the uproar had ceased, Shaul called the Talmudim to him, and having embraced them, went away to go to Macedonia. And having gone through those parts, and having encouraged them with many words, he came to Yawan, where he spent 3 months. When he was about to sail to Syria, he decided to return through Macedonia, as a plot was made against him by the Yahudim. And he was accompanied by Sopatros of Beroea, and Aristarchus and Secundus of the Thessalonians, and Gaius of Derbe, and Timotheus, and Tychicus, and Trophimus of Asia. And these, going ahead, waited for us at Troas. And we sailed away from Philippus after the days of Masot, and came to them at Troas in 5 days, where we stayed 7 days. And on one of the Shabbathot, the Talmudim, having gathered together to break bread, Shaul, intending to depart the next day, was reasoning with them, and was extending the word till midnight. And there were many lamps in the upper room where they were assembled. And a certain young man named Eutychus was sitting in a window, being overpowered by a deep sleep. As Shaul kept on reasoning, he was overcome by sleep and fell down from the 3rd story, and was picked up dead. And Shaul, having gone down, fell on him, and embracing him said, "Do not be upset, for his life is in him." Then going up, and having broken bread and eaten, he talked a long while, even till daybreak, and so went forth. And they brought the young man in alive, and were encouraged not a little. And we, going ahead to the ship, sailed to Assos, intending to take Shaul on board there, for so he had arranged, intending himself to go on foot. And when he met us at Assos, we took him on board, and came to Mytilene. And from there we sailed, and the next day came opposite Chios. And the next day we arrived at Samos, and remained at Trogulian. And the following day we met to Miletus. For Shaul had decided to sail past Ephesus, so that he might lose no time in Asia, for he was hurrying to be at Jerusalem, if possible, on the day of the festival of Shabbathot. And from Miletus he sent to Ephesus, and called for the elders of the assembly. And when they had come to him, he said to them, "You know, from the first day that I came to Asia, how I was with you all the time, serving the throne with all humility, with many tears and trials which befell me by the plotting of the Yahudim. As I kept back, none of that was profitable, but proclaimed it to you, and taught you publicly, and from house to house, witnessing to Yahudim and also to Yahwanites, repentance towards Elohim, and belief in our Adon Yahushua HaMashiach." that the Ruach HaKodesh witnesses in every city, saying that change and pressures await me. But I do not count my life of any value to me, so that I might accomplish my mission with joy and the service which I received from the Adon Yahusha, to bear witness to the good news of the favor of Elohim. And now see, I know that you all, among whom I went about proclaiming the reign of Elohim, shall see my face no more. Therefore I witness to you this day that I am clear from the blood of all. For I did not keep back from declaring to you all the counsel of Elohim. Therefore take heed for yourselves and to all the flock among the Ruach HaKodesh, as made you overseers to shepherd the assembly of Elohim, which he has purchased with his own blood. For I know this, that after my departure savage wolves shall come in among you, not sparing the flock. Also from among yourselves men shall arise, speaking distortions to draw away the Talmudim after themselves. Therefore watch, remembering that for 3 years, night and day, I did not cease to warn each one with tears. And now, brothers, I commit you to Elohim and to the word of his favor, which is able to build you up and give you an inheritance among all those having been Kodesh. I have coveted no one's silver or gold or garments, and you yourselves know that these hands supplied my needs, and for those who were with me. All this I showed you by laboring like this, that you ought to help the weak. And remember the words of the Adon Yahusha, that he said, it is more baruch to give than to receive. And having said this, he knelt down and prayed with them all. And there was much weeping among them all, and the falling on Shaul's neck, they kissed him, distressed most of all because of the word which he had said, that they would see his face no more. And they went with him to the ship. Chapter 21. And it came to be, when we had torn ourselves away from them and had launched, we ran a straight course and came to Kos, and the next day to Rhodos, and from there to Patara. And having found a ship passing over to Phoenicia, we went aboard and launched, and having sighted Kupros, and having passed it on the left, we sailed to Syria, and landed at Sor. For the ship was to unload her cargo there. And having found Talmudim, we remained there 7 days. And they told Shaul through the Ruach not to go up to Jerusalem. And when it came to be that our days there were ended, we left and went on. All of them accompanied us with wives and children, till we were out of the city, and kneeling down on the beach, we prayed. And having embraced one another, we boarded the ship, and they returned to their homes. And when we had completed our voyage from Troy, we came to Ptolemais, and having greeted the brothers, we stayed with them 1 day. And on the next day we left and came to Caesarea, and went into the house of Philippus, the evangelist, who was one of the 7, and stayed with him. Now this one had 4 maiden daughters who Nabu. And as we were staying many days, a certain Navi named came down from Yahudah, and having come to us, he took the girdle of Shaul, bound his own hands and feet, and said, "Thus says the Ruach HaKodesh, thus shall the Yahudim at Yerushalayim bind the man who owns this girdle and deliver him into the hands of the Gentiles." And when he heard this, both we and those from that place begged him not to go up to Yerushalayim. And Shaul answered, "What do you mean by weeping and breaking my heart? For I am ready not only to be bound, but also to die at Jerusalem for the name of the Athon Yahusha." And as he could not be persuaded, we ceased, saying, "Let the desire of the Athon be done." And after those days, having made ready, we went up to Jerusalem, and also some of the Talmudim from Caesarea went with us and brought with them one Nisan of Kupros, an early Talmud with whom we were to lodge. And when we had arrived in Jerusalem, the brothers received us gladly. And on the following day, Shaul went in with us to Yaakov. And all the elders came, and having greeted them, he was relating one by one what Elohim had done among the Gentiles through his service. And when they heard it, they praised the Athon. And they said to them, "You see, brother, how many thousands of Yahudim there are who have believed, and all are ardent for the Torah. And they have been informed about you that you teach all the Yahudim who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moshe, saying not to circumcise the children or to walk according to the practices. What then is it? They shall certainly hear that you have come. So do this, what we say to you. We have 4 men who have taken a vow. Take them and be cleansed with them, and pay their expenses, so that they shave their heads. And all shall know that what they have been informed about you is not so, but that you yourself also walk orderly, keeping the Torah. But concerning the Gentiles who believe, we have written and decided that they should keep themselves from what is offered to idols and blood, and what is strangled and whoring." Then Shaul took the men on the next day, and having been cleansed with them, went into the Mikdash to announce the completion of the days of separation, until the offering should be presented for each one of them. And when the 7 days were almost ended, the Yahudim from Asia, seeing him and the Mikdash, were stirring up all the crowd, and they laid hands on him, crying out, "Men of Israel, help! This is the man who is teaching all men everywhere against the people and the Torah and this place. And besides, he also brought Yahwehnites into the Mikdash, and has profaned this Mikdash, because they had previously seen Trophimus the Ephesian with him in the city, whom they thought that Shaul had brought into the Mikdash. And the entire city was moved, and the people rushed together, seized Shaul, and dragged him out of the Mikdash. And immediately the doors were shut. And while they were seeking to kill him, a report came to the commander of the squad that all Jerusalem was in confusion. At once he took soldiers and captains and ran down to them. And they, having seen the commander and the soldiers, stopped beating Shaul. Then the commander came near and took him and commanded him to be bound with 2 chains, and was asking who he was and what he had done. And in the crowd some were shouting this and others that, and not being able to ascertain the truth because of the uproar, he commanded him to be taken into the barracks. And when he came to the stairs, he had to be carried by the soldiers because of the violence of the crowd. For a large number of people followed after, crying out, "Away with him!" And as Shaul was about to be led into the barracks, he said to the commander, "Am I allowed to say somewhat to you?" And he said, "Do you know, Yawanite? Are you not the Mitzrite, who some time ago stirred up a revolt and led the 4,000 assassins out into the wilderness?" But Shaul replied, "I am a Yahudi from Tarsus in Kilkia, a citizen of no mean city, and I beg you allow me to speak to the people." And having given him permission, Shaul, standing on the stairs, motioned with his hand to the people. And when there was a great silence, he spoke in the Ivri language, saying, Chapter 22. Men, brothers, and fathers, hear my defense before you now. And when they heard that he spoke to them in the Ivri language, they kept greater silence, and he said, "I am indeed Yahudi, having been born in Tarsus of Kilkia, but brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel, having been instructed according to the exactness of the Torah of our fathers, being ardent for Elohim, as you all are today, who persecuted this way to the death, binding and delivering up into prisons both men and women, as also the Kohen Haggadol bears me witness, and all the eldership, from whom I also received letters to the brothers, and went to Damascus to bring in chains even those who were there to Jerusalem to be punished. And it came to be, as I was journeying and coming from near Damascus about noon, suddenly a great light shone around me out of the Shamayim, and I fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to me, "Shaul, Shaul, why do you persecute me?" And I answered, "Who are you, Adonai?" And he said to me, "I am Yahushua of Nazareth, whom you persecute." And those who were with me indeed saw the light and were afraid, but they did not hear his voice speaking to me. And I said, "What shall I do, Adonai?" And the Adon said to me, "Rise up, go into Damascus, and there you shall be told all that you have been appointed to do." And as I could not see because of the esteem of that light, being led by the hand of those who were with me, I came into Damascus, and a certain Hananiah, a dedicated man according to the Torah, being well spoken of by all the Yahudim dwelling there, came to me and stood by and said to me, "Brother Shaul, look up." And at the same hour I looked up at him, and he said, "The Elohim of our fathers has appointed you to know his desire, and to see the righteous one, and to hear the voice from his mouth. Because you shall be his witness to all men of what you have seen and heard. And now, why do you delay? Rise up, be immersed, and wash away your sins, calling on the name of Yahuwah. And it came to be when I returned to Jerusalem, and while I was praying in the Mikdash, I came to be in a trance. And I saw him saying to me, him meaning Elohim, hurry and get out of Jerusalem speedily, because they shall not accept your witness concerning me. And I said, Adonai, they know that in every congregation I was imprisoning and beating those who believe on you. And when the blood of your witness Stephanos was shed, I also was standing by, giving my approval to his death and keeping the garments of those who were killing him. And he said to me, go, because I shall send you far from here to the Gentiles. And they were listening to him until the word, and then they lifted up their voice, saying, away with such a one from the earth, for it is not fit that he should live. As they were shouting and tearing their garments and throwing dust into the air, the commander ordered him to be brought into the barracks, and said that he should be examined by flogging in order to find out why they were shouting so against him. And as they were stretching him out with straps, Shaul said to the captain, who was standing by, is it permitted for you to whip a man who is a Roman and uncondemned? And when the captain heard, he went and reported to the commander, saying, watch what you are about to do, for this man is a Roman. And having come, the commander said to him, say to me, are you a Roman? And he said, yes. And the commander answered, with a large sum I obtained this citizenship. And Shaul said, but I was even born so. Then at once those who were about to examine him withdrew from him. And the commander was also afraid after he found out that he was a Roman. And because he had bound him, and on the next day, intending to know for certain why he was accused by the Yahudim, he released him and commanded the chief Kohanim and all their council to come, and brought Shaul down and put him before them. Chapter 23. And Shaul, looking intently at the council, said, men, brothers, I have lived in all good conscience before Elohim until this day. And the Kohen Hagadol Hananiah commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth. Then Shaul said to him, Elohim is going to strike you, whitewashed wall. And do you sit judging me according to the Torah? And do you command me to be struck contrary to the Torah? And those who stood by said, do you revile the Kohen Hagadol of Elohim? And Shaul said, I did not know, brothers, that he was the Kohen Hagadol. For it has been written, you shall not speak evil of the ruler of your people. Now Shaul, perceiving that one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, cried out in the council, men, brothers, I am a of a Pharisee. I am being judged concerning the expectation and resurrection of the dead. And when he had said this, there came a dissension between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the crowd was divided. For the Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, nor messenger, nor spirit, but the Pharisees confess both. And there was a great uproar, and certain of the scribes of the party of Pharisees were earnestly contending, saying, "We find no evil in this man, and if a spirit or messenger has spoken to him, let us not fight against Elohim." And a great dissension having come, the commander, fearing lest Shaul would be pulled to pieces by them, commanded the soldiers to go down and seize him from their midst and bring him into the barracks. And on the following night the Athon stood by him and said, "Take courage, Shaul, for as you have witnessed for me in Jerusalem, so you have to bear witness at Rome too." And when it became day, some of the Yahudi made a conspiracy and bound themselves under an oath, saying that they would neither eat nor drink until they had killed Shaul. And those making this conspiracy were more than 40, who having come to the chief Kohanim and elders said, "We have bound ourselves under the great oath not to eat at all until we have killed Shaul. Now then you, with the council, inform the commander to have him brought down to you tomorrow, as intending to examine more exactly all about him. And we are ready to kill him before he comes near." And when Shaul's sister's son heard of their ambush, he went and entered into the barracks and reported to Shaul. And Shaul, having called one of the captains to him, said, "Take this young man to the commander, for he has somewhat to report to him." He indeed then took him and led him to the commander and said, "The prisoner Shaul called me to him and asked me to bring this young man to you, having somewhat to say to you." And the commander, having taken him by the hand, went aside by themselves and asked, "What is it that you have to report to me?" And he said, "The Yahudim have agreed to ask that you bring Shaul down to the council tomorrow, as intending to inquire more exactly about him. Therefore, do not let them persuade you, for more than 40 of them lie in wait for him, men who have bound themselves by an oath, neither to eat nor to drink until they have killed him. And now they are ready, waiting for the promise from you." Then the commander dismissed the young man, having commanded him, "Inform no one that you reported this to me." And having called near a certain two captains, he said, "Get 200 soldiers ready to go to Caesarea, and 70 horsemen and 200 spearmen after the 3rd hour of the night. And provide beasts on which to place Shaul, and bring him safely to Felix the governor." Having written a letter in this form, Claudius Lucius, to the most excellent governor Felix, greetings. This man, having been seized by the Yahudim and being about to be killed by them, I rescued, having come with soldiers, having learned that he was a Roman. And desiring to know the reason they accused him, I brought him before their council. I found out that he was accused concerning questions of their Torah, but there was no charge against him deserving death or chains. And when I was informed that there was to be a plot against the man by the Yahudim, I sent him immediately to you, having also commanded his accusers to state before you the charges against him. Be strong. So the soldiers, as they were commanded, took Shaul and brought him by night to Antipatris. And on the next day they left the horsemen to go on with him and returned to the barracks, who having come to Caesarea and delivered the letter to the governor, they also presented Shaul to him. And the governor, having read it, and having asked of what province he was, and being informed that he was from Kilkia, said, I shall hear you when your accusers arrive also. And he commanded him to be kept in Herod's palace. Chapter 24. And after 5 days, the Kohen Hagadol, Hananiah, came down with the elders and a certain speaker, Tertullus, and they brought charges against Shaul before the governor. And when he was called upon, Tertullus began to accuse him, saying, having obtained great peace through you and reforms being brought to this nation by your forethought, we accepted it always and in all places, most excellent Felix, with all thanks. But in order not to hinder you any further, I beg you to hear us briefly in your gentleness. For having found this man a plague, who stirs up dissension among all the Yahudim throughout the world, and the ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes, who also tried to profane the Mikdash, and whom we seized, and wanted to judge him according to our law. But the commander Lucius came along, and with much violence took him out of our hands, commanding his accusers to come to you, and by examining him yourself you shall be able to know all these of which we accuse him. And the Yahudim also agreed, maintaining that these were so. And when the governor had motioned him to speak, Shaul answered, knowing that for many years you have been a judge of this nation, I gladly defend myself. Seeing you are able to know that it is not more than 12 days since I went up to Jerusalem to worship, and they neither found me in the Mikdash disputing with anyone, nor stirring up the crowd, either in the congregations or in the city, nor are they able to prove the charges of which they now accuse me. And this I confess to you, that according to the way which they call a sect, so I worship the Elohim of my fathers, believing all that has been written in the Torah and in the Navi, having an expectation in Elohim, which they themselves also wait for, that there is to be a resurrection of the dead, both of the righteous and the unrighteous. And in this I exercise myself to have a clear conscience toward Elohim and men always. And after many years I came to bring kind deeds to my nation in offerings. At which time certain Yahudim from Asia found me cleansed in the Mikdash, neither with a crowd nor with disturbance, who ought to be present before you to bring charges if they have any against me. Or else let these themselves say if they found any wrongdoing in me while I stood before the council. Other than for this one declaration, generation which I cried out, standing among them, concerning the resurrection of the dead, I am being judged by you today. And having heard this, having known more exactly the way, Felix put them off, saying, when Lucius, the commander, comes down, I shall decide your case. And he ordered the captain to keep Shaul, and to have ease, and not to forbid any of his friends to attend to him. And after some days, when Felix came with his wife, Drusilla, who was a female Yahudi, he sent for Shaul and heard him concerning the belief in Mashiach. And as he reasoned about righteousness and self-control and the judgment to come, Felix became frightened and said, for the present, go. And when I find time, I shall send for you. At the same time, too, he was anticipating that money would be given to him by Shaul, that he might release him. Therefore, he sent for him more often and conversed with him. But after 2 years had passed, Porcius Festus succeeded Felix, and wanting to do the Yahudim a favor, Felix left Shaul bound. Chapter 25. Festus, therefore, having come to the province 3 days later, went up from Caesarea to Jerusalem. And the Kohen Hagadol and the chief men of the Yahudim informed him against Shaul, and they begged him, asking a favor against him, that he would send him to Jerusalem, making a plot along the way to kill him. Then indeed Festus answered that Shaul should be kept at Caesarea, and that he himself was about to depart shortly. Therefore, he said, let those who have authority among you go down with me and accuse this man to see if there is any fault in him. And having spent more than 10 days among them, he went down to Caesarea. And on the next day, sitting on the judgment seat, he commanded Shaul to be brought. And when he had come, the Yahudim who had come down from Jerusalem stood about, bringing many and heavy charges against him, Shaul, which they were unable to prove. While Shaul said in his own defense, neither against the Torah of the Yahudim, nor against the Mikdash, nor against Caesar did I commit any sin. But Festus, wanting to do the Yahudim a favor, answering Shaul, said, do you want to go up to Jerusalem and be judged before me there concerning these? And Shaul said, I am standing at Caesar's judgment seat, where I should be judged. To the Yahudim I have done no wrong, as you know well enough. For if indeed I do wrong or have committed whatever deserving death, I do not refuse to die. But if there is naught in these of which these men accuse me, no one is able to give me up to them. I appeal to Caesar. Then Festus, having talked with the council, answered, you have appealed to Caesar. To Caesar you shall go. And certain days having passed, Sovereign Agrippas and Bernice came to Caesarea to greet Festus. And when they had spent many days there, Festus laid Shaul's case before the sovereign, saying, there is a man a prisoner, about whom the chief Kohanim and the elders of the Yahudim informed me when I was in Yerushalayim, asking for a judgment against him. To them he answered, "It is not the Roman practice to give up any man to destruction before the accused meets the accuser's face to face and has a chance to answer for himself concerning the charge against him. They, therefore, having come together without any delay, I sat on the judgment seat the next day and commanded the man to be brought in. When the accusers stood up, they brought no charge against him, such as I expected, but had some questions against him about their own worship and about a certain Hoshea, who had died, whom Shaul was claiming to be alive. And being uncertain how to investigate these matters, I asked whether he wanted to go to Jerusalem and there be judged concerning these matters. But when Shaul appealed to be kept for the decision of Augustus, I ordered him to be kept until I sent him to Caesar. Then Agrippa said to Festus, I was wanting to also hear the man myself. And he said, tomorrow you shall hear him. Therefore, on the next day, Agrippa and Bernice, having come with great show and having entered the place of hearing with the commanders and the eminent men of the city, Shaul was brought in at the order of Festus. And Festus said, Sovereign Agrippa, and all the men present here with us, you see this one about whom all the community of the Yahudim pleaded with me both at Yerushalayim and here, shouting that he ought not to be living any longer. But I, having found that he had committed naught deserving death, and that he himself had appealed to Augustus, I decided to send him. I have none definite to write to my master concerning this. Therefore, I have brought him out before you, and most of all before you, Sovereign Agrippa, so that after the examination has taken place, I might have somewhat to write. For it seems to me unreasonable to send a prisoner and not to signify the charges against him. Chapter 26. And Agrippa said to Shaul, you are allowed to speak for yourself. Then Shaul stretched out his hand and made his defense. I think myself, Baruch, Sovereign Agrippa, because today I shall make my defense before you concerning all of which I am accused by the Yahudim. You being most of all an expert, knowing of all practices and questions which have to do with the Yahudim. So, please hear me patiently. Truly then, all the Yahudim know my way of life from youth, which I led from the beginning among my own nation at Jerusalem, since they have known me from the first. If they want to witness that I lived as a Pharisee according to the strictest sect of our observance, and now I stand and am judged for the expectation of the promise made by Elohim to our fathers, to which our 12 tribes, earnestly serving Elohim night and day, expect to attain. Concerning this expectation, O Sovereign Agrippa, I am accused by the Yahudim. Why is it considered unbelievable among you if Elohim raises the dead? Therefore, indeed, I thought within myself that I ought to do much against the name of Yahushua. which also I did in Jerusalem, and I shut up many of the Kodeshim in prison, having received authority from the chief Kohanim. And when they were put to death, I gave my vote against them, and punishing them often in all the congregations, I compelled them to blaspheme. And being exceedingly enraged against them, I persecuted them even to foreign cities. While thus engaged, as I was journeying to Damascus with authority and commission from the chief Kohanim, at midday, O sovereign, I saw a light from the Shemaim, brighter than the sun, shining around me and those who journeyed with me. And when we had all fallen to the ground, I heard a voice speaking to me and saying in the Hebrew language, Shaul, Shaul, why do you persecute me? It is hard for you to kick against the prods. And I said, who are you, Adonai? And he said, I am Yahushua, whom you persecute. But rise up and stand on your feet, for I have appeared to you for this purpose, to appoint you a servant and a witness both of what you saw and of those which I shall reveal to you, delivering you from the people and the Gentiles to whom I now send, to open their eyes, to turn them from darkness to light, and the authority of Satan to Elohim, in order for them to receive forgiveness of sins and an inheritance among those who are Kodesh by belief in me. Therefore, sovereign Agrippas, I was not disobedient to the vision of the Shemaim, but declared first to those in Damascus and in Jerusalem and in the country of Yehudah and to the Gentiles that they should repent and turn to Elohim and do works worthy of repentance. This is why the Yahudim seized me in the Mikdash and tried to kill me. Therefore, having obtained help from Elohim, to this day I stand, witnessing both to small and great, saying neither else than what the Naviim and Moshe said would come, that Hamashiach would suffer, would be the first to rise from the dead. He would proclaim light to the people and to the Gentiles. And while saying this in his defense, Festus said with a loud voice, Shaul, are you mad? Much learning is turning you to madness. But Shaul said, I am not mad, most excellent Festus, but I speak words of truth and sense. For the sovereign before whom I also speak boldly knows this. For I am persuaded that none of these are hidden from him, for this has not been done in a corner. Sovereign Agrippas, do you believe the Naviim? I know that you do believe. And Agrippa said to Shaul, with a little, you might persuade me to become a Mashiach. And Shaul said, much or little. I pray to Elohim that not only you, but also all who hear me today might become as such as I also am, except for these chains. And having said this, the sovereign stood up, as well as the governor and Baranike, and those sitting with them. And having withdrawn, they spoke to each other, saying, this man is doing naught deserving of death or chains. And Agrippa said to Festus, this man could have been released if he had not appealed to Caesar. Chapter 27. And when it was decided that we should sail to Italia, They delivered Shaul and some other prisoners to one named Julius, a captain of the Augustan regiment. And having embarked in a ship from Adram about to sail along the coast of Asia, launched. Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessaloniki, was with us. And on the next day we launched at Sidon. And Julius treated Shaul kindly and allowed him to go to his friends to receive attention. And from there we put out to sea and sailed close to Kupros, because the winds were against us. And having sailed over the sea along Kilkia and Pamphylia, we came to Mura and Lucia. And there the captain, having found an Alexandrian ship sailing to Italia, put us on board. And having sailed slowly many days, and arriving with difficulty off Knidos, the wind not allowing us to proceed, we sailed close to Crete of Salmone, and passing it with difficulty, we came to a place called Fair Havens, near the city of Lasaia. And much time having passed, and the sailing now being dangerous, because the fast was already over, Shaul advised them, saying, Men, I see that this voyage is going to end with damage and great loss, not only of the cargo ship, but also our lives. But the captain was persuaded by the pilot and the owner of the ship rather than what Shaul said. And because the harbor was unsuitable to winter in, the greater part advised to launch from there too, if somehow they were able to reach Phoenice, a harbor of Crete, facing southwest and northwest, to pass the winter. And a south wind blowing softly, thinking they had obtained their purpose, having lifted anchor, they sailed close along Crete. And not long after, a stormy headwind rushed down from it, called Northeaster. And when the ship was caught and unable to head against the wind, we let her go and were driven. And having run under a small island called Claude, we were hardly able to control the small boat. And having hoisted it, they used helps to ungird the ship. And fearing lest they should run around on Syrtis, they lowered the tackle, and so were driven. And because we were exceedingly storm-tossed, the next day they began to throw overboard. And on the third day we threw out the ship's tackle with our own hands, when now neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no small storm beat on us. All expectancy that we would be saved was taken away. And when there had been a long absence from food, Then Shaul, standing in the midst of them, said, Truly, men, you should have listened to me, not to have sailed from Crete and sustained this damage and loss. And now I urge you to take courage, for there shall be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. For tonight a messenger of Elohim, to whom I belong and whom I serve, stood by me, saying, Do not be afraid, Shaul. You have to be brought before Caesar. And look, Elohim has favorably given you all those who sail with you. Therefore take courage, men, for I believe Elohim that it shall be according to the way it was spoken to me. However, we need to run aground on some island. And when the 14th night came, as we were driven up and down the Adriatic Sea, about midnight the sailors suspected that they were drawn near some land. So taking surroundings, they found it to be 20 fathoms. And a little farther on they took surroundings again and found it to be 15 fathoms. And fearing lest we should run aground on the rock, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern and were praying for day to come. But when the sailors were seeking to escape from the ship, when they had let down the boat into the sea under pretense of going to cast out anchors from the prow, Shaul said to the captain and the sailors, If these men do not remain on the ship, it is impossible for you to be saved. Then the soldiers cut the ropes of the boat and let it fall off. And when day was about to come, Shaul urged them all to take food, saying, Today is the 14th day. You have continued without food and eaten naught. So I urge you to take food, for this concerns your safety, since not a hair shall fall from the head of any of you. And having said this, he took bread and gave thanks to Elohim in the presence of them all. And when he had broken it, he began to eat. And they were all encouraged, and also took food themselves, and all of us were 276 beings in the ship. And being satisfied with food, they were lightening the ship, throwing out the wheat into the sea. And when day came, they did not recognize the land, but they noted a certain bay with a beach, onto which they planned to run the ship if possible. And having cast off the anchors, they left them in the sea. Meanwhile, untying the rudder ropes, as they hoisted the foresail to the wind and made for the beach. But coming upon a place where 2 seas met, they grounded the ship, and the prow stuck fast and remained immovable. But the stern was broken by the pounding of the surf, and the soldiers intended to kill the prisoners, lest any of them should swim away and escape. But the captain, intending to save Shaul, kept them from their intention, and commanded those able to swim to jump first and get to land, and the rest, some indeed on boards, and some on items of the ship. And so it came to be that all reached and received us all, because of the rain that was falling, and because of the cold. But Shaul, having gathered a bundle of sticks, and having laid them on the fire, an adder came out because of the heat, and fastened itself on his hand. And when the foreigners saw the creature hanging from his hand, they said to each other, "This man is certainly a murderer, whom, though saved from the sea, still right ruling does not allow to live." Then indeed he shook off the creature into the fire, and suffered no evil. And expecting that he would swell up or suddenly fall down dead, they waited for a long time, and saw no harm come to him. Changing their minds, they said that he was a mighty one. And in the neighborhood of that place there were lands of the chief of the island, whose name was Publius, who received us and housed us in a friendly way for 3 days. And it came to be that the father of Publius lay sick with inflammation and dysentery. Shaul went into him, and having prayed, he laid his hands on him and healed him. And when this took place, the rest of those on the island who had diseases also came and were healed, and also respected us in many ways. And when we were departing, they provided for our needs. And after 3 months, we launched in an Alexandrian ship, which had wintered at the island, and whose figurehead was twin brothers. And having landed at Suraco, we stayed 3 days, from which place we went round and arrived at Rhegium. And after 1 day the south wind blew, and the second day we came to Puteoli, where we found brothers, and were invited to stay with them 7 days. And so we went toward Rome. And when the brothers there heard about us, they came to meet us as far as Forum of Appius and 3 taverns. When Shaul saw them, he thanked Elohim and took courage. And when he came to Rome, the captain delivered the prisoners to the captain of the guard. But Shaul was allowed to stay by himself with the soldier guarding him. And it came to be after 3 days that Shaul called the leaders of the Yahudim together. And when they had come together, he said to them, "Men, brothers, though I have done naught against our people or the practices of our fathers, I was delivered as a prisoner from Jerusalem into the hands of the Romans, who, when they had examined me, intended to let me go, because there was no cause for putting me to death. But the Yahudim spoke against it, and I was compelled to appeal to Caesar. Not that I had any accusation against my nation. This, therefore, is the reason I called for you, to see you and speak with you. It is because of the expectation of Israel that I am bound with this chain." And they said to him, "We we neither receive letters from Yahudah concerning you, nor have any of the brothers who came reported or spoken whatever wicked about you. And we think it right to hear from you what you think. For indeed, concerning this act, we know that it is spoken against everywhere. And having appointed him a day, many came to him where he was staying, to whom he was explaining, earnestly witnessing about the reign of Elohim, and persuading them concerning Yahushua, from both the Torah of Moshe and the Navi, from morning until evening. And some indeed were persuaded by what was said, but some believed not. And disagreeing with one another, they began to leave after Shaul had spoken one word. The Ruach HaKodesh rightly spoke through Hoshea the Navi to our fathers, saying, "Go to this people and say, hearing you shall hear, but by no means understand, and seeing you shall see, but by no means perceive. For the heart of this people has become thickened, and with their ears they heard heavily, and they have closed their eyes, lest they should see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and turn back, and I should heal them. Therefore let it be known to you that the deliverance of Elohim has been sent to the Gentiles, and they shall hear." And when he had said these words, the Yahudim went away and had a great dispute among themselves. And Shaul stayed 2 entire years in his own rented house, and was receiving all who came to him, proclaiming the reign of Elohim, and teaching about the Adon, Yahushua HaMashiach, with all boldness, unhindered. That's it.